Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om Allah.
You're watching Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name, and I'm speaking today with Peter Westmore, who's the National President of the National Civic Council. In fact, we've had 2 previous interviews with Peter, and we're following along those themes. What we need to be looking at in the first instance is a background to what's called the primacies of the National Civic Council. And last week we covered several of those. But a very important one is actually Judeo-Christian values, Peter. If you'll permit me, I'll just read what it says in your primacies here. Judeo-Christian values which provide the cement to hold our society together in opposition to the prevailing view which rejects the concept of common good and makes the difference simply between right and wrong, truth and falsehood, as a matter of personal preference only, rather than objective reality. Judeo-Christian values. What sort of values are we talking about there? What's the common ground between the Judeo and the Christian values? Is it the 10 Commandments, or is it something broader than that?
It's a very fascinating question, and in a sense, I guess what we're trying to describe is an idea which a professor of philosophy, who by the way was an atheist, Professor David Armstrong at Sydney University, whom I knew very well. And David once said to me, societies are held together either by force or by consent. Mm-hmm. And it struck me at the time a very powerful observation. Now, the consent on which our society is held together, which means the way that we treat each other, not just the fact that we've got a police force which enforces a whole set of laws, but the way we treat each other. As to whether when you say to me, I will do such and such, that I can be confident that you will do such and such. Mm-hmm. That I can trust other people with whom I'm in business or who are my friends and so on. This goes to the foundations of what really makes society works, in my view. It is consent. It is a sense in which people work with, respect and trust each other. And I believe that this actually comes really through the Christian foundations on which most people in our society were brought up, and the set of values which they have, which include this idea that we should all treat each other properly, that we should respect other people, that we should be honest in our dealings. And these are not things, by the way, which can be written into any law. So this is the foundation that I'm speaking about. And my view is that these come from the Judeo-Christian foundations of our society. The fact that we are the product of probably 3,000 years of consistent teachings as to how we should treat our neighbour, our fellow man. And I think that one of the central points which comes through in this, and certainly at the very core of what Jesus taught his disciples, was what he said to his disciples after he'd risen from the dead. And almost the last thing he said to them, he said, I leave you one commandment, love one another as I have loved you. Mm-hmm. Now that is, I think, almost the highest expression of the Jewish and of the Christian tradition.
Yes.
And to the extent that that has had a positive influence on society, it's because it has followed through those principles and foundations on which a society works.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take on that. Just a bit of a curly one in the sense that the Judeo-Christian religions are Abrahamic based.
Yes.
There is another one which looms up,
Yes,
which is Islam, of course.
Yes.
Which is also Abrahamic.
Yes.
Is there any potential, or is it explored the potential to maybe include a perspective from that religion as well?
Well, firstly, I think that all people, yes, and I would go even beyond that and say that there are many people who don't necessarily belong to or regard themselves as being part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, not necessarily members of any organised church, who nonetheless share those fundamental values. And certainly people of the Islamic faith, in my view, do overwhelmingly share those values, particularly those who have come to Australia to live, because they've come here to live because they want to be able to live in peace. And I think we have to encourage them to become fully Australian if they're not sort of fully Australian, and also to uphold the same value system which we have. And by the way, when people come to Australia, implicitly they are accepting that that is the basis on which they would live within the country in which they're coming. So I think we have to welcome people of the Islamic faith into Australia. It's only a relatively small proportion of the population in Australia, but it's one which I would hope is able to play an increasing role as time goes on. And I certainly see no incompatibility between people of the Islamic faith and those of the Jewish or Christian faith.
You just gave me a cue there. You said as time goes on. Well, time goes off at the present time, so we'll go for a break. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and my guest today is Peter Westmore, National President of the National Civic Council. Peter, we've been talking about some background stuff with the National Civic Council. I'd like to address some of the current activities you're involved in. I have this brochure here called Making the Internet Safe. Australian Family Association, the council's involved with that. Is that not right?
Yes, well, the National Civic Council was involved in helping to set up the Australian Family Association over 20 years ago to attempt to put the family into the centre of public debate in terms of taxation policy and so on. Right. So this is one important aspect of the Australian Family Association's work and the National Civic Council's, because we are conscious of the fact that the internet, which is just a wonderful resource in terms of being able to give us access to information almost instantaneously, and people who use Skype and other things are able to sort of video conference and so on with people on the other side of the world, which is great. But there is also a dark side to this, which we have to recognise, and which arises from the fact that that particularly the pornography industry has seen this as a means of propagating pornography, and I think from their point of view making money right round the world. It's a vast industry, and the internet is the means by which this industry is sustained and has also grown. And I think it contributes substantially to unhappiness of many individuals in society. I think the problem of addiction to pornography, particularly internet pornography, is an represented problem in our society.
Okay. So this, the Making Internet Safe, is this directed towards creating technology or giving advice or creating awareness in families?
I think the starting point is awareness.
Yes.
Because the truth is, pornography is, through the internet is instantly available, and differently from pornography of a previous generation, which a person could acquire by going to a certain bookstore or something like that. This is all available in the home, and so it's also available with very few controls to children, including even young children. And so the effect of exposure to pornography, in my view, is corrosive. And I say that having seen it from my time at university, where it was used to desensitise young people as they're moving from towards and into adulthood, I think with damaging consequences, but particularly with children, where it has the effect of removing from children, in a sense, their innocence, and also of invading their privacy in a way which is potentially very damaging to them.
Yes.
And I think that firstly we have to increase the level of awareness of this problem in our society. Secondly, I think we're entitled to say to the large internet service providers, this is a social problem, and that you, as people who are providing this important infrastructure, have to recognise that it's a social problem. And it's a matter of regret to me that some internet service providers are also companies which host pornographic websites. And we have tried, by lobbying companies, to say to them, this is antisocial.
Yes.
This is damaging our society. Please don't host pornography. Now, the answer that they give us is, well, if we don't, they'll just go overseas and do it. And we know that that is true, but nonetheless, we think it's an exercise in corporate responsibility, that companies which are themselves say that they will act ethically, protect the people within the country from exposure to this material. Now, we know that that's not the total problem, and so we have encourage parents to basically use filters and filtering software, and we also encourage the government, and have encouraged successive governments, to proceed with trials of filtering software to try to reduce the availability of hardcore pornography through the internet. Now, both the major parties have expressed an interest in it, but actually neither of them has yet done it. But we think this is an important issue, and it will be an increasingly important issue as the technology continues to become even more readily available. So it's an ongoing issue in our society.
Yes, I just picked up your list of objectives here to see whether there's any reference in there to actually mores, social mores or family mores. Do you have any pathway to that, in the sense that this is at one end, this is at the user end?
Yes.
Are you doing anything to remove the need to use it from a mores point of view within a family? Sexual awareness.
Sure. This is a good question, and we're certainly not doing as much as I think we should be doing in that respect. What we have tried to do in regard to, particularly in regard to families, is to encourage, and bodies such as the forthcoming World Congress of Families will be partly devoted to this, to trying to empower parents in how they can interact with their children so that they are creating a better sort of a sense of parental role and parental responsibility and parental leadership for children.
Yes.
So we're not just talking about negation. We're not talking about banning stuff. We're talking about trying to empower parents to take control.
Yeah.
And we're also trying to empower adults. Take control. Don't allow this yourself to be trapped into this morass, which is what it is. Yes.
Now I'm going to take control because we've come to our break. I was looking for those key words. We'll be back in just a moment.
Mani Allah. Hallelujah. Mani Allah.
Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and today I'm speaking with Peter Westmore, who is the National President of the National Civic Council. We've addressed family in quite a lot of nuances, Peter, thus far. And may I just read from the primacies? You've got a list of things that you believe, and these are family support, which is the restoring of meaningful economic support for families; parental roles, recognition of the roles and responsibility of parents; and children, the support for policies which recognise the importance of children and enhance their well-being. There's a Congress on, the Congress of Families. I think it's in May, isn't it?
Yes.
Can you give us some background as that, because the council's involved in that, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Well, it was one of the senior officers of the Australian Family Association, a lady named Mary Louise Fowler, who originally got the idea that we, in conjunction with other pro-family and also some religious organisations, decided that we would try to conduct a World Congress of Families similar to those which have been held in a number of European countries over the last 10 or 12 years, to try to run one in Australia. And the Congress, which will be held in Sydney in May, will be addressing the issues of how do we support the family, recognition of the family as being vital to the success, to the prosperity, including the economic prosperity, to the stability of our society and to the happiness of people within our society. Also recognition that the family is very different from the rest of our society, which operates on the principle that people pay for things. When we go into a shop, we pay for goods and so on. But in the family, all of the transfers which are taking place are actually taking place around love. That's what parents are doing for their children. They will do almost anything for their children. And the family structure is really very interesting, just looked at from that point of view. It doesn't work on the economic principles that the rest of society does. It works on altruism, on the idea of people cooperating with other people, whether there's a payment or not, and of this principle of, in a sense, unconditional love.
Yes.
And we want to say this is vital for the future of our country. And there are so many different aspects of this which are raised, which need to be sort of both teased out, but also in a discussion of, we hope, a couple of thousand people from all around Australia and from overseas to talk about what strategies can be used to address the challenges which families face today. And we spoke earlier about the problem of the internet, for example. Well, this is an area where it is really important that families, parents, be empowered to take control of the television set, to take control of even of computers at home, to make sure that they are sort of used positively. And we have sessions in the Congress which will be, in a sense, of people with expertise in those areas helping parents to play that type of a role within the family structure itself.
And very important, because bullying and youth suicides, there's been a large number of those arising out of bullying through that media. So it's worthwhile bringing some controls in on that.
Well, it's very important that, firstly, that we have to try and empower people to know there are solutions to these problems. And there are a whole range of issues, including sort of mental health issues, which are arising from, in a sense, the problems particularly that young people are facing today. You mentioned sort of youth suicide. We've got a range of health disorders which seem to affect particularly young people, and our view is that the family is vital to address those problems. We cannot simply say that is a mental health problem.
No.
It is, in part at least, a family problem. And to help to solve them, you can't simply rely upon doctors and medical professionals. We want families to have an important role in that. And this Congress is going also to address those issues. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's a very important opportunity for people to discuss how best we can move forward to strengthen the institution of the family, to empower parents, and also to ensure that children are properly protected. And that's what we want to do.
We only have a brief time, but I wouldn't like us to finish the interview without addressing the free-to-believe process of defending our religious freedoms, particularly where we're talking about the Judeo-Christian model, etc. Free-to-believe, what's the background to that?
Well, the background is there have been sort of laws introduced in Victoria which are laws which are anti-discrimination laws, which have the laudable purpose of protecting people who are vulnerable to exploitation. So my position is anti-discrimination laws have got an important place in our society. We do not want to see a society in which people are unjustly discriminated against. There are, however, situations, and particularly in relation to the functioning of religious organisations, where people who have strong and sincerely held religious beliefs should be able to practice those beliefs, and to practice those beliefs even though it might look superficially as if they are sort of discriminating against other people. And the reason why I say is superficially is because there have been a number of court cases in which Christian organisations have been on the receiving end of really very strong criticisms which arise from the fact that people are simply acting out their own religious beliefs, and we have to protect those in society.
And that's totally laudable, and we're acting out our religious belief that time will always end. Peter, thank you so much for these 3 interviews. It's been most informative.
I'm delighted to have had the opportunity. Thanks very much indeed, Norm. Thank you.
You've been watching Harmony in Diversity, and we'll be back with you next week.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allahu